A polished black hotel door hummed to life as it answered a call in Dutch. Behind that door stood a woman, who would soon be far more than just a cleaning lady in the eyes of the world. The following day, she was summoned. Zara's phone rang as she swept the grand lobby of the exclusive Royal Crest Hotel. Usually she'd ignore any call during work hours. Rule number 1, never answer your phone while on duty, especially as part of the cleaning staff. But today, her heart raced. The number flashing on the screen was one she couldn't ignore. It was the university. After 6 failed attempts at securing a scholarship for her master's program in linguistics, this could be her breakthrough. Just one moment, she whispered to herself, her fingers trembling as she hid behind a tall marble pillar, shielding herself from the glances of the passing guests. Zara had no idea that in the next few minutes, everything would change. "Zara Williams," she answered with bated breath, hoping no one would overhear. The voice on the other end was calm, collected, and spoke perfect Dutch. It was Professor Van Harten from the University of Amsterdam. Without missing a beat, Zara responded in flawless Dutch, discussing the details of her application for their international linguistics program. She noticed that the conversation was going smoothly until she nervously mentioned her motivation letter, which she feared had not been sent on time. That was when she felt the shift in the air. Looking up, she froze. Standing a few feet away from her, watching with an expression of surprise, was Maxwell Harper, the billionaire owner of the Hotel Empire, and beside him stood Michelle Collins, the manager, her eyes seething with fury. Zara's breath caught in her throat. She quickly ended the call. "I'll call you back later," she muttered in Dutch, hastily hanging up. "Ms. Williams, in my office." Now, Michelle's voice sliced through the tension. The walk to the small administrative office in the basement felt like an eternity. Zara felt the gaze of her colleagues, some pitying, others secretly satisfied. At 29, Zara was the only black woman in the entire cleaning department who held a degree. But of course, that didn't seem to matter to Michelle Collins. "You know the rules, Ms. Williams," Michelle barked as soon as Zara entered the office. "No personal calls during working hours, especially in public spaces." Zara fought to keep her tone respectful. "It was an important call, Michelle. It was from the university." "I don't care if it was the Pope calling," Michelle snapped. "And what was that you were speaking?" "French." "No, wait. It was Dutch. Is that supposed to impress me?" "It was Dutch," Zara corrected, unable to hold back. Immediately, she regretted it. "I don't care what language you were speaking," Michelle shot back, her voice rising. "What I care about is that the owner of this hotel, Maxwell Harper, saw one of my employees, cleaning lady, ignoring her duties and chatting on the phone in the lobby." Zara bit her lip, anger bubbling up inside her. She had seen the white receptionists make personal calls regularly without a single consequence, but she knew this was different. Michelle had always had something against her. It was no secret. "You're being reassigned," Michelle continued coldly. "You'll be working in the conference center bathrooms for the next 3 months. Maybe there, you can practice all the languages you want without embarrassing this hotel." Zara's stomach dropped. The conference center bathrooms meant double shifts without overtime. It was Michelle's go-to punishment for anyone who stepped out of line. "You're lucky you're not being fired," Michelle added, dismissing her. "Now get out of my office." That night, Zara returned to her tiny apartment shared with 2 nurses. She stared blankly at her linguistics degree and international certificates framed on the peeling wall. 6 years of cleaning hotel rooms, while trying to save for a master's degree, while sending out resumes that never received a response, even after countless in-person interviews. The injustice weighed heavily on her. But the next morning, determined to push through, Zara arrived early at work, focused and professional despite the deep hurt in her chest. That's when the phone rang at the front desk. "Zara Williams, HR wants to see you." Jennifer, the head receptionist, said. Her tone seemed unusually sympathetic. Zara was confused. HR on the top floor next to the executive offices. That was uncharted territory for the cleaning staff. With her nerves on edge, Zara rode the elevator, invisible, as always among the executives discussing million-dollar deals, who didn't even spare a glance for her. When she arrived at HR, the director, Tim Collins, motioned for her to sit. Zara had never been in an office like this. It felt surreal. "Please, have a seat, Miss Williams," Tim said in a neutral voice. Zara sat stiffly, preparing for the worst, probably termination. "I'm sure you're wondering why we've called you in," Tim began. "Maxwell Harper, the owner of this hotel, has requested a meeting with you." Zara blinked in disbelief. Maxwell Harper, the billionaire, what could he possibly want with her? Tim handed her a file. "I asked HR to pull your resume after hearing about your phone call yesterday. You've been working here for 6 years, correct? Cleaning rooms." He paused and looked at her over the rim of his glasses. Georgetown graduate, fluent in 6 languages including Dutch, Mandarin, French, and Italian. Zara's mind raced. How did he know all of this? She had never mentioned her qualifications to anyone at the hotel. "You've been cleaning my bathrooms for 6 years. Maxwell's voice rang out, deeper now as he entered the room. His presence was commanding. But you're also a graduate with honors in linguistics. Why is that? Zara opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. I've sent 47 resumes to the International Relations Department here, she said, her voice trembling. I've applied for an internal transfer 12 times, all of them denied by Michelle Collins and Mr. Stevens, the Director of Operations. Maxwell's eyes narrowed. Michelle and Mr. Stevens, I see. Zara couldn't understand why this was happening. What was going on? Why was Maxwell Harper, one of the most powerful men in the hotel industry, asking about her? What was he seeing in her? Why was she so important? What no one here knows, Maxwell began, sitting down across from her, is that I've noticed something disturbing. I recently hired a consulting firm to investigate why my East Coast hotels have seen such alarming turnover rates among qualified non-white employees. He glanced at her, his expression hardening. And I'm beginning to think you've been a victim of something much bigger than just bad management. Zara didn't know whether to feel hope or fear. The truth was unfolding in ways she hadn't expected. Maxwell sighed and opened a folder. Listen, there's a Dutch-Chinese trade conference here tomorrow. We need someone who speaks both languages fluently, someone who understands cultural nuances. Do you know anyone? Zara blinked, her heart skipping a beat. Are you asking me? Maxwell nodded. Yes, Ms. Williams. I'm offering you the position of International Relations Coordinator for this event. Temporarily, of course, but I think it's the right fit. Zara's breath caught in her throat. And the pay? $5,000 a week, Maxwell stated bluntly, looking her in the eyes. Starting today. Zara felt as if the ground beneath her feet had disappeared. $5,000 a week, that was more than she earned in 3 months. Why me? She asked. There are hundreds of qualified candidates for this role. Because I heard you speaking Dutch like a native. Because you have the qualifications I need. And because I'm starting to believe that what's going on in this company is a systematic injustice. We have people like you, extraordinary people, hidden in plain sight, cleaning toilets when they should be running the company. Maxwell stood up and handed her a new badge, signaling the change that was about to come. Zara walked out of the HR office with a new badge, her steps lighter than they had been in years. This was her chance, her moment. And with that first to step into the unknown, Zara Williams's life was about to change forever. Zara stepped into the elevator with a new badge and full access to the hotel systems. As the elevator doors closed, she felt the weight of her new reality settle on her shoulders. No longer just a cleaning lady, she was now the International Relations Coordinator for the most prestigious event the hotel had ever hosted. The days of scrubbing floors and cleaning bathrooms were behind her, or so she hoped. Her new role didn't feel real. The HR department was still buzzing with activity, and she was quickly escorted to the VIP room, where preparations for the conference were underway. As she entered, the room fell silent. It was filled with executives, business moguls, and foreign diplomats preparing for a high-stakes Dutch-Chinese trade conference. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Zara had always been the invisible woman in the hotel. Now, she was no longer a nameless, faceless cleaning staff member, but the looks of disbelief from the high-ranking employees as she walked into the room were impossible to ignore. Michelle Collins, the ever-present manager with her piercing gaze, stood stiffly near the door. Zara didn't even bother acknowledging her as she made her way to the front. There was no time for small talk now. She had a job to do. The event was set to begin in a few hours. Zara immediately noticed the translation documents meant for the Chinese guests. They were riddled with mistakes, translations that could cause a diplomatic nightmare if left unchecked. Misuse of formal language, improper cultural references, and terms that could be seen as offensive in Chinese corporate culture. Zara knew she had to fix these mistakes quickly as she got to work. Her mind raced through all the years she had spent cleaning rooms and attending interviews that had led to nothing. She had always known she was meant for something more. But now, with her degree in linguistic skills, it felt like the world was finally opening up to her. Zara, how did you catch those errors? Maxwell's voice startled her as he walked into the room, a slight smile on his face. He had been watching her work from the doorway. Whoever did these translations knows the basics of the language, but not the cultural nuances, Zara explained. The words used here might seem harmless to someone unfamiliar with the language, but they are actually offensive in formal business communication. Maxwell's eyes widened. You're right. This would have been a disaster. Whitmore promised he hired the best. It cost a fortune. Whitmore didn't hire the best, Zara said bluntly. He hired someone without checking credentials. I know because I've seen these errors before in the translations he's submitted for previous conferences. Maxwell nodded thoughtfully. This doesn't surprise me. Whitmore is always cutting corners to save a buck. But you, Zara, this is exactly why I brought you in. As the hours passed and the conference began, Zara's calm professionalism shone through. She glided effortlessly between Dutch and Mandarin, facilitating conversations and mediating between executives with a natural elegance no one could have predicted the level of ease with which she navigated the complex diplomatic discussions. In the middle of a break, one of the Dutch business executives approached her with a questioning look. Wait, Aren't you the student who wrote that article on linguistic variation in international business, the one published in the Journal of Applied Linguistics? Zara blinked, surprised. Yes, that was me, she said, feeling a rush of pride. I've cited your work at 2 different conferences, the man said with enthusiasm. It's fascinating. You've truly made an impact in our field. Within moments, others gathered around, asking her about her research. Zara was flattered but also keenly aware of the significance of this moment. The very people who had once ignored her treated her like invisible air were now seeking her out, recognizing her for the value she could bring. But none of them, not even Maxwell Harper, knew the full extent of the changes unfolding. Behind Zara's poised exterior, she was weaving a subtle web of connections that would eventually expose a corrupt system at the heart of the hotel's operations. In the days that followed, the conference progressed smoothly. But what began as a chance for Zara to prove her linguistic skills had become a much larger mission, one that involved uncovering systematic discrimination, gross financial mismanagement, and years of corruption that had been hiding in plain sight. Meanwhile, Zara continued to work closely with Maxwell, who had become increasingly interested in her observations about the hotel's operations. He began to see something that had eluded him for years, a pattern of behavior that had quietly permeated the company culture. Whitmore's name kept coming up in discussions about budget mismanagement. He had hired unqualified translators, paid them far more than they were worth, and ignored the very employees who had the qualifications to handle the work. All the while, people like Zara were kept in the shadows, their potential never realized. One evening, as Zara was reviewing the translation contracts for an upcoming series of international events, she found something disturbing. Whitmore had approved payments for an exorbitant amount to his niece's translation company. Upon further investigation, Zara discovered that the translators had no experience with formal Mandarin, and the errors were not mistakes, they were deliberate. In a quiet moment, Zara stood in the HR department, reviewing files. She had access to everything, now contracts, hiring records, payment receipts, and more. As she sifted through the data, she realized just how deep the rot went. Whitmore's niece, Ashley, had been hired for these high-paying contracts, despite her lack of qualifications, and the errors in her translations had been costing the company millions in potential business. But Zara had everything documented. She knew how to use the system to her advantage. And now she had the leverage she needed to confront Whitmore and bring the truth to light. The following morning, she walked into Maxwell's office with a determined look on her face. "I've found something," she said, showing him the proof on her phone. "Whitmore has been using his family connections to inflate costs for translation services. The company's been losing money because of him." Maxwell was furious. "I knew something wasn't right, but this..." Zara didn't need to say more. The evidence spoke for itself. That afternoon, as she prepared for the final day of the conference, Maxwell called a meeting with the board of directors. The room was filled with tension, anticipation thick in the air. Zara stood beside him, her calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded in the hotel's inner workings. Maxwell began the meeting, his voice steady but firm. "Today, we uncover a scandal that has cost us millions. We've discovered evidence of systematic discrimination, nepotism, and gross financial mismanagement, and it has all been hidden behind people's assumptions about who is qualified and who isn't." Zara's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. She had already done the hard part. Now it was time for the truth to come. That the room fell silent as the board absorbed the shocking details. But the true shock was yet to come. "I am proud to announce," Maxwell continued, his voice ringing with authority, "that Dr. Zara Williams, whom some of you have known as a cleaning lady, will now take on a new role in this company, Global Director of Multilingual Operations." The room was stunned. The silence lasted for several seconds before the applause started. Some of the cleaning staff who had been watching the broadcast cheered with tears in their eyes. As the meeting ended and Zara made her way back to her new office, she couldn't help but smile. It was a bittersweet victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. She had taken the fight to the system, and she had won. The next day, as she looked out at the Manhattan skyline from her new office, Zara reflected on everything that had happened. It all started with a phone call in Dutch, and now everything had changed, not just for her, but for dozens of employees who had been overlooked for far too long. Her journey wasn't just about personal success, it was about creating opportunities for others. For the first time in years, Zara felt truly seen. Zara Williams was no longer invisible, and neither were the talents of the many employees who had been waiting in the shadows for their moment to rise. If you like the story, don't forget to like and subscribe the channel for more inspirational stories. Also share your thoughts and suggest any name below the comment. We feel pleasured to make our next story's main character with that name. Stay with us.